bright and early, rise and shine. I'm up pretty early this morning. Was just a really good mood, and I wanted to make another live filmmaker tips and tricks video. And I was thinking of this last night after talking to other filmmakers last night what about which film genres are the cheapest to make and which movie genres are the most expensive. And I thought this was a really interesting topic, something that was different, and I was like, yes, we need to talk about this. I would have to say the cheapest in my perspective, after doing almost every genre that I think are the basic ones. I think the cheapest ones that you can get by making are horror movies and action movies. And let me kind of explain why. And I think for people who don't make movies, I think people would automatically think that horror movies are super expensive with all the blood and all that stuff. But in reality, it's not that expensive, which is very kind of odd. So I'm gonna explain that. Horror movies aren't expensive because you can get the props, the makeup, and everything for pretty cheap if you go to the right places. And if you go to Walmart or Party City the day after October and all that stuff, there's always tons of sales on that stuff, way cheaper than beforehand. So I recommend, if you're making a horror movie or something like that, go after October. That's when the prices tend to come down, instead of getting them and buying them during. But getting more into it, I feel like making horror movies, that's why there's so many B movies out there, is because just the formula for just making a horror movie, it doesn't take a lot. Like, I mean, you can get a lot of people together, your friends, and just get them in one space and film a killer going after them. It's very easy. It's a very basic plot formula. It's very easy. That's why there's a ton of B movies and horror movies out there. It's very easy to make horror movies and B movies. And also, when it comes to costumes, if you're just making or filming a slasher movie, you don't need to like get certain costumes or anything that much. Just find people wearing their generic clothing, and unless they don't want to have fake blood again on it, since fake blood does stain the shit out of clothes, there's ways to get around that. Like, if you put I think one way is if you put fabric softener in the fake blood. That's also one tip. It doesn't work that well, but just in general, if they're okay with getting doused with fake blood on their shirt, that's totally fine. But I think another genre that I have a lot of experiences in directing is directing action movies, and this is why I also say they're very cheap to make. It's kind of the same principle as making a B movie or a horror movie. They're very simple plot devices. It's just a guy, you're gonna have a gunfight or something very easy. Doesn't need to be a lot of planning. They're very generic, very easy to do, and they're very cheap. Same with the clothes in the wardrobe. You don't need to go like shopping a lot to get good costumes for an action movie, unless you're doing sci-fi or something like that. And we're going to talk a bit more about that now. I think the most expensive types of movies that people can make are period films. Films that are set in the past are very hard to make. I made a World War II Holocaust film in 2016, and oh my God, was it the most hardest thing to find good costumes. The costumes took months to find, and we didn't just go to we did go to thrift shops and stuff, but it took a lot more finding, and it took a lot more searching. I think we spent over, almost $2,000 on costumes alone for that movie. And just it was very hard, because when you're trying to take something, from a different time, especially during World War II era. You need to find the exact type of fabrics and materials. It was a lot, and it was a lot more than I thought. Going into it, period pieces are very hard, and they're very you don't think about it at first, but it takes a lot of time to get costumes. Then you need to find the decent locations that show that time period the way that you're trying to show it. Fortunately for us, when I made that World War II Holocaust film, we reached out to a very successful and large airsoft field that had a very disheveled and destroyed town in it. And so we contacted them. It looked like the perfect place to film kind of like a Nazi scene or kind of like a concentration camp thing, and that's what we were going for. That's what the script was about, was these two Holocaust survivors, and that's how we got that location. It was we talked to them, pitched me the idea, told them it's based off two actual people during the Holocaust, and that's how we got access to film there. Shout out to BattleHack and their incredible airsoft field. Definitely go check them out. They are fantastic. And I think another really expensive genre to make is sci-fi. Honestly, since it kind of goes on both spectrums. If you're making something in the past, it's hard to do that because you're trying to get the stuff together, vintage things, old things from the past. It's typically hard to find. And then if you go for the future, if you're making a sci-fi or a future film, that's also equally almost harder because you're having to design sets, clothing that's in the future, or styles or fashion that may come. It goes both ways. It's very hard, but typically to save your money and to make very cheap and effective genres, I think, in my opinion, are horror movies and action movies. Very basic, cookie cutter type of plots and formulas, not too hard on your bank or your budget. Just get a bunch of your close friends together, film a gunfight, or film someone being stabbed or murdered. It's very generic, very basic. It doesn't take a lot of time. You don't need to be searching around for these very specific things that much. It's very simple. So I thought this would be a very good topic to talk about. The most expensive films to make and the most cheapest films to make too. All right, guys, have a blessed morning and have a wonderful day and go out and make something great. I'm Misha. I'll see you later. Bye.